Since I get a little busy on these great banquet weekends, I didn't have the time to throw an outline up on the Bible app, so I just figured, let's use the Bible as our outline this morning. So if you pull up, I'm going to preach through the text and use the text as my outline. First, I want to talk about Jeopardy, though. Can I get an amen for Jeopardy?
Amen.
All right, we got some Jeopardy fans. Don't you love, I'm going to describe one of the greatest moments in the week for you all. Are you ready? It's when that category comes up. Say Greek mythology or say Bible. Whenever Bible lines up, I'm like, yes. I'm really good also at sports mascots for some reason. But we all have that category, right? And then when that category comes and you just go straight down 200, 400, 600, 800, 1,000, you're just like, yes! I could be on Jeopardy! And I keep saying I'm going to take the test, and I know I will have an epic meltdown when I'm there with the buzzer. But Jeopardy is a good way for me to describe what spiritual gifts are all about. Because each of us, my category on Jeopardy is going to be different than your category. We all have our gifts. We all have our mad knowledge, as I call it, in some category. But spiritual gifts kind of work the same thing. Is we've all got our category. We've all got our gift. And we have this thing called a spiritual gift inventory, or survey, that I'm currently asking our elders and deacons to fill out. And you have these variety of gifts that line up, and you find out which are your strong spiritual gifts. Lila's is singing and preaching. This is her new thing. She's very cute when she's been holding up her hands. She was telling me something. We were in the waiting room waiting for Drew. So Lila's gift is preaching right now. But that's what I want to talk about a little bit today, is help you all understand how each and every one of you is gifted in some way. Your gift might not be standing up here like me and preaching a sermon every Sunday. Your gift might not be joining our tri-state choir and singing a song like that. But each and every one of you is gifted in some way, and that way is important. It's just as important as any other gift. Well, let me start with the story of Pentecost. Debbie read that the disciples had all gathered. And the event of Pentecost was that each disciple was given a manifestation of the Spirit. Each was given the Spirit in the form of a tongue of fire that hovered over them. And on that day, the gift that the Bible tells us that the disciples received was the gift of tongues. And there are a variety of interpretations as to what might have been meant by tongues. Did they speak in a brand new language? Or did they speak in ways that those native people from all over the region could understand the gospel? But what happened, however the gift of tongues was meant from the Pentecost story, the Corinthians had taken this story and elevated the gift of tongues as a higher gift than any others. If the disciples received it at Pentecost, then surely that was the spiritual gift. That was the top of all the spiritual gifts. So when Paul gets to the 12th chapter of his letter, what he wants to try to get them to understand is that when it comes to spiritual gifts, there is no hierarchy. There is no one gift that is greater than the other, because they all come from the same Spirit. So as we're here on Pentecost Sunday, we might imagine looking around this room and we all have a tongue of fire. I like to put it down here. But for us, each tongue represents a different spiritual gift. So let's begin with verse 1 of Corinthians 12. Paul wrote, "Now concerning spiritual gifts, brothers and sisters, I do not want you to be uninformed." The sense that Paul had when writing about spiritual gifts is the difference between two different words for spiritual gifts. There was a word, pneumaticus, that meant that any gift that was motivated by the Spirit. It was more of a tangible sort of gift, an object of sorts, a gracious gift. Paul would have preferred the word for spiritual gifts, charisma. Now we get this idea when we think of charismatic. It means people who are ecstatic and, in a frenzy, charismatic, outgoing. Where in fact the word charisma simply refers to a gift. And it's a very special gift because the word charisma is closely related to the word for grace in Greek. The word for grace in Greek is charis. And so what the word for gifts does is add on an ending. Charisma. And this sort of gift is any manifestation of grace. We talk about it in terms of sacrament on great banquet weekends. How the sacraments are means of grace, means by which we embrace God's grace. But when we talk about spiritual gifts, it's the same understanding. That a spiritual gift is any expression, any word, any act of kindness, anything that you do that is an act of grace towards another person. A spiritual gift is a way of extending God's grace to another person. That's what makes them so special. Let me give you one example of maybe a spiritual gift that you wouldn't think of. But I want to let you know that leftovers are a spiritual gift. Leftovers. Paul goes on to list different gifts later in this chapter, and I think he would agree with me that we could put on leftovers. Because here's what happened this weekend. It's the first weekend we've done this, but it's not the last. So on these great banquet weekends, we try to prepare. Don's our kitchen head, Don Cherry. And he has prepared meals for 32 people. But some of us are light eaters, some go back for seconds. So we always tend to have leftovers. Not a whole ton of leftovers, but a good amount of leftovers. So the kitchen crew, our great kitchen crew, Don, Roger, and Dave, came up with this idea that they wanted to take the leftovers somewhere. So they got a hold of St. Elizabeth's just down the road and asked if they would like to have the leftovers. And so these leftovers that might have been pitched or taken somewhere else instead became a spiritual gift to 9 young ladies who happened to be pregnant and are staying in St. Elizabeth's. And they enjoyed taco night the other night. And last night they enjoyed pork chops. They had gone to a shelter expecting maybe peanut butter and jelly, and here, because of the spiritual gift of the great banquet, we were able to turn leftovers not into just food, but an act of grace towards young women who, I don't know all their stories. Maybe they haven't received a gift of grace like that. Maybe they didn't feel they deserved meals like this. But that's what grace is all about. In verse 2, Paul says, "You know that when you were pagans, you were enticed and led astray to idols that could not speak." For Paul, another way of talking about speechless idols was meaningless idols. He's inspired by the prophets on this point. So the prophets often warned the people against idols because, like Habakkuk would say, idols can't talk to you. Idols aren't going to answer you back. And idols can't teach you a thing. And that's why he encouraged the people to go to the living God who would answer, who does speak, and who has a lot to teach us. And we might think that we are not an idolatrous people anymore. We don't worship gods, but we do. We worship gods of money. We worship gods of politics. We worship gods that look us in the mirror every morning when we brush our teeth. Our egos, ourselves. And what we fall into the trap of believing is that our spiritual gifts are meant for the person in that mirror. That God gave us gifts simply to make us happy. That God gave us gifts simply to give us status in life. That God gave us gifts for our own best interest, for our own selfish gain. For me, that was the gifts, I think, that are well suited for the ministry. So most of you all know my story, so the short version is that one of the big shifts in my life was when I went from being a performer and a trained performer to becoming a minister. And I have colleagues that are really great preachers. They can present a really awesome sermon, but sometimes it comes across as more of a performance. There's a lot of good performance preachers out there. I hope that I don't come across that way, because I came to understand that God gave me gifts to stand up here and present a sermon to you all. I don't want to present it, I don't want to perform it. I want to preach it in a way that engages you all, that helps you all grow. And so I went in my own life from a life where I was just honing my spiritual gifts so that the spotlight could be on me, me, me. That I've shifted in my life's understanding to realize that I'm a caretaker of gifts that God has given me for other people. And that God's focus when it comes to giving you whatever gift it is, the focus is not on you when God gave you that gift. The focus was on the person who needs your gift. The focus on that food downstairs. It was not just to feed the guests at this banquet. Instead, God knew that that food was intended ultimately to feed the guests down at St. Elizabeth. Verse 4. Paul writes, "Now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone." This, again, goes back to this idea that there are no hierarchy when it comes to gifts. There's a variety of gifts. They look differently because we are all different. But they all come from the same Spirit. But I love what Paul does in this verse, which is a little of an aside. But Paul says that not only does the gift come from the Spirit, it is activated by the Spirit. And I love the Greek word because in Greek, the word is energo. It is the word that we get energy from. And so when it comes to spiritual gifts, it's not just that they come from the Spirit, but the Spirit energizes them in our lives. And I don't know if you've ever been a part of where you've used a gift and you are fully aware that you're energized by the Spirit about it. And it can be any sort of gift. And it's what's unique about Great Banquet Weekends. I can tell you, we had Matt Trueblood and Don Locke give talks on this weekend so far. And each of them had the same experience. For Matt, it was his first talk. And I was talking with him, and he was trying to describe how just it seemed like that suddenly the talk wasn't his anymore. That it was his Spirit that was energizing him. And you hear that from anyone who at least prepares a talk. That there's this moment where suddenly it's not you speaking, it's the Spirit energizing your words and speaking through you. But the talks aren't just the biggest role on the weekend. Remember, all these gifts, there's not one more important than the other. Because, I don't know about energized, but we had one of our agape guys, and I'm going to leave nameless for this moment, but he might tell you, he ended up cleaning up puke in a bathroom this morning. Because poor Vaughn was sick, right? And this person was happy to go clean it up. It was his service. He didn't complain one bit about having to do that because his brother needed that gift. The food, the kitchen, again, those are gifts that go and all work together on these weekends. And it's the same way that our church should work. That each of us should be willing to do whatever gift that the Spirit has given us to do and to be energized by that Spirit. Because it leads us to the next and most important point for Paul, and which is the title of this sermon. The reason we are given these gifts, as I've already implied, Paul says in verse 7, if you're going to highlight one, highlight verse 7. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit. Charisma. Each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. This is where Paul pushes back against that idea that our gifts are just for me, me, me. That our gifts are given simply to serve our own self-interest. Instead, Paul pushes back and states that when it comes to spiritual gifts, the Spirit's intent is never on the individual, it's always on the whole. As I told you in performing, where I thought everything was about me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who in some way has been there in your life, where you think the whole world is about me. When God looks at it, it's we. Always. God loves you and cares for you as individuals, but God cares for us collectively as a family, as a whole. And this contradicts that everything society tries to tell us. We have a world that wants us to, buy self-help books, have the personal guide for self-improvement, do 10 things to be a better person. When our focus as the church is how can we make this a better world? How can we make this world more like the kingdom? And how can we use our individual gifts to help God do that? Whatever gift we've been given, we should consider them as God's grace in action. I want you this morning to consider yourself as a vehicle of grace. That God has loaded grace into your tank and wants you to take it out and spread it all over the world. Whatever gifts we've been given, they haven't been given for our own benefit. It's great when our gifts have some benefit, but there's no greater benefit we can feel than when we understand that our gifts are not for our benefit, but for that of others. Someone this week needs your gift. Someone this week might need a simple repair done at the house. Someone this week might need a listening ear. Someone this week might need a little note dropped saying that you're thinking of them. Whatever gifts we've been given, they are no bigger or smaller than anyone else's. For God wouldn't give gifts if they were not important and vital to the building of the kingdom, to kingdom work. So we end with God's greatest gift. And God's greatest gift to us was Jesus. Jesus was quite literally, we talk about him in terms of the Word made flesh, but Jesus was grace made flesh. And Jesus saw his life not what he could gain out of it. Jesus didn't see his life on what he could personally gain, or he would have never let himself been nailed to that cross. Jesus didn't see his life for what he could gain, but for everything that he could give, so that you might gain everything. Not for his own benefit. That's the lesson of the cross. It's not for his benefit. That was for ours. And finally, this Jesus sees none of us as bigger or smaller than anyone else. For when he looks at us, gifted vehicles of grace, all he sees is someone worth saving and someone worth loving. And we must remember he sees everyone that way. And so should we, and act